What if the greatest act of courage today is not picking up a weapon, but putting it down? In a world addicted to power, pride, and retaliation, we've been taught that strength looks like domination. But real strength is choosing dialogue when anger screams for revenge. It's choosing humanity when fear demands division. Every war begins with a story of us versus them. But what if the story we need now is different? What if the bravest leaders, the bravest people, are the ones who dare to say? Because the future isn't built by victory and war, it's built by courage and peace. You know, when people talk about war, they often talk about strategy, territory, power, almost like it's a chess game, maps, numbers, headlines. But the reality is very different when you zoom in, because war isn't lines moving on a map, it's people. It's families who go to sleep one night thinking tomorrow will be normal, and then wake up to a world that has completely fallen apart. Think about what that really means. Homes that took decades to build disappear in minutes. Parents lose children. Children grow up without parents. Entire cities, places filled with memories, schools, laughter, ordinary life turn into rubble. And even when the fighting stops, the damage doesn't magically disappear. The trauma stays for generations. Economies collapse. Education stops. Innovation slows down. Humanity moves backward instead of forward. And here's the strange thing. In the modern world, we're capable of incredible breakthroughs. We can build reusable rockets, develop artificial intelligence, explore other planets, and connect billions of people instantly. The same species capable of solving massive problems is still spending enormous resources perfecting ways to destroy itself. That contradiction should make all of us pause. Though we do, because every missile launched represents resources that could have gone somewhere else, into science, into healthcare, into education, into building a future where people actually thrive instead of just survive. Imagine what humanity could achieve if even a fraction of that energy went toward progress instead of conflict. When you really look at the cost, it becomes obvious. Nobody truly wins a war. Some may claim victory, but humanity as a whole loses something every single time. And if we're serious about the future of civilization, then the smartest move we can make is simple. Stop fighting the wars that are holding humanity back. If you look back through history, one thing becomes very clear. Wars almost never start in a single moment. They build slowly, quietly, often in ways that people don't even notice at first. It begins with tension, with fear, with leaders and communities starting to see each other not as people, but as threats. Narratives form, us versus them. And once that idea takes root, it spreads quickly. Fear is powerful. When people feel uncertain about their safety, their future, or their identity, it becomes easy to believe that conflict is the only solution. Add pride to the equation. National pride, and suddenly stepping back or admitting mistakes feels impossible. Instead of listening, sides begin to harden. Instead of understanding, they prepare for confrontation. Technology has amplified this pattern. Information moves faster than ever before, but unfortunately, so does misinformation. A single rumor, a distorted story, or a piece of propaganda can fuel anger across millions of people in minutes. The result is a cycle where distrust grows faster than dialogue. And once people stop listening to each other, conflict starts to feel inevitable. But here's the interesting part. When you look closely, most conflicts around the world aren't actually about ordinary people wanting to harm each other. Most people want the same basic things: safety for their families, opportunities for their children, and a chance to live with dignity. The tragedy is that these shared goals get buried under politics, fear, and misunderstanding. So the real challenge isn't just stopping wars after they begin. The real challenge is recognizing the early signals, the rising tensions, the growing divisions, and having the wisdom to address them before they explode into violence. Because once conflict reaches the battlefield, the cost becomes enormous. The smartest war is the one that never starts. Now here's the part that's often misunderstood. People sometimes think choosing peace is a sign of weakness, that stepping back from conflict somehow means surrender. But if you really think about it, starting a fight is often the easiest decision you can make. Anger pushes you forward. Pride keeps you from backing down. In the moment, conflict can feel powerful. Choosing peace, on the other hand, requires something much harder. It requires patience when emotions are high. It requires leaders willing to sit in uncomfortable rooms, listen to opposing views, and keep negotiating, even when progress feels painfully slow. It requires the ability to look beyond short-term pride and focus on long-term survival and prosperity. In engineering and technology, we always try to solve problems at their root. You don't fix a complex system by smashing parts of it. You fix it by understanding how it works and improving it. Humanity isn't that different. Our global system is interconnected. Economies, communication networks, science, and innovation all depend on cooperation. When conflict erupts, it disrupts the entire system. Think about the level of courage it takes for someone to say, "Let's stop. Let's talk," especially when the pressure from the outside world is demanding retaliation. That moment, choosing dialogue over destruction, is where real leadership shows up. Peace isn't passive. It's active. It requires creativity, negotiation, empathy, and persistence. It means designing solutions where both sides can move forward instead of pushing each other toward collapse. And if we're serious about building a future where humanity thrives, where we expand our knowledge, our technology, even our presence beyond this planet, then cooperation isn't just a moral choice. It's a strategic one, because the strongest civilizations aren't the ones that win the most wars. They're the ones wise enough to avoid them. One of the most powerful tools humanity has ever developed isn't a weapon. It's conversation. Dialogue sounds simple, almost too simple. but it has the ability to transform situations that once seemed impossible to solve. When people actually sit down and really talk, something interesting happens. The distance between the enemy and a human being starts to shrink. Most conflicts survive on distance. Distance between cultures, distance between perspectives, distance between what we believe about someone and who they actually are. When communication disappears, assumptions take over, and assumptions are dangerous because they allow fear to grow in the absence of understanding. But the moment dialogue begins, the dynamic changes. You start to hear the concerns, the fears, the motivations on the other side. Not through headlines, not through propaganda, but directly. And that doesn't mean you suddenly agree on everything. In fact, real dialogue often begins with deep disagreement. But disagreement is far more productive when it's happening across a table instead of across a battlefield. And then, think about the biggest technological breakthroughs in history. They didn't happen in isolation. They happened through collaboration. Scientists sharing ideas, engineers solving problems together, teams across the world building on each other's discoveries. Progress has always been a collective effort. Humanity moves forward when we connect, not when we divide. The same principle applies to peace. Dialogue creates space for creative solutions. Solutions where cooperation replaces destruction. When nations talk, when cultures exchange ideas, when people listen before reacting, new possibilities open up that violence could never create. It's not always fast, and it's not always comfortable. But it's infinitely more productive than conflict. Because the moment people start talking instead of fighting, the future starts becoming possible again. It's easy to think that peace is something decided only in government buildings or international summits, that it's the responsibility of presidents, generals, and diplomats. But the truth is, the culture that leads to either conflict or cooperation starts much closer to home, with ordinary people. Every society is shaped by the attitudes of its citizens, the conversations we have, the way we treat people who are different from us, the ideas we pass down to the next generation. These things quietly shape the future. When communities normalize hatred, division grows. But when people choose curiosity, respect, and empathy, the entire tone of a society begins to shift. Think about how connected the world is today. Billions of people communicate instantly across borders through technology. Someone on one side of the planet can share an idea, a story, or a perspective with someone thousands of miles away in seconds. That kind of connection has never existed before in human history, and it creates a powerful opportunity. Young people especially have a huge role to play here. They're growing up in a world where borders matter less in communication, where collaboration happens globally, where ideas spread faster than ever. When young minds focus on innovation, science, education, and solving global problems together, they naturally build bridges that politics alone cannot create. Peace becomes stronger when it's supported by millions of everyday decisions, choosing dialogue over hostility, understanding over stereotypes, cooperation over division. These small choices, repeated across communities and countries, gradually build a culture that resists the pull of conflict. Because in the end, leaders don't operate in a vacuum. They respond to the expectations of the people they represent. And when people demand cooperation, progress, and stability, the world begins to move in that direction. Real peace isn't just negotiated at the top. It's built by millions of people choosing humanity every single day. Now, imagine a world where the energy, resources, and creativity we pour into war are redirected toward building the future. A world where instead of factories producing weapons, they produce solutions, clean energy, sustainable cities, advanced healthcare, and technologies that allow humanity to explore the stars. The reality is, the potential of humanity is almost limitless. We have the tools, the brains, the connectivity. What we lack is the collective decision to stop wasting so much of it on destruction. The vision for a peaceful future isn't abstract. It starts with prioritizing cooperation over conflict. Nations working together to solve climate change, pandemics, and poverty. Communities across borders, sharing knowledge, innovation, and culture instead of suspicion and fear. Every dollar spent on reconciliation, education, and innovation compounds over generations, creating stability that war can never produce. And here's the crucial point. Peace is not passive. Building it requires courage, bold leadership, and a willingness to imagine solutions that most people dismiss as impossible. It requires challenging old habits of retaliation, of pride, of short-term thinking. The people who are brave enough to invest in peace are actually shaping a stronger, more resilient civilization. Technology shows us what's possible when collaboration replaces conflict. Think of global scientific teams working together, solving problems that no single country could manage alone. That same principle applies to humanity as a whole. The future depends on expanding that mindset beyond labs and boardrooms to governments, communities, and everyday citizens. If we want to reach our full potential, if we want to see a civilization that thrives instead of constantly recovering from its own mistakes, then the choice is clear. The future isn't written by war, it's designed by those who have the courage to build peace.